Okay, so like I was saying, in the East, they're looking at integration, like how do things fit together? How are all things working together as part of a whole? Because remember, all is one. All is part of this singular whole, and you can call it the one, you can call it, you can call it God, you can call it mind, consciousness. The name does not matter so much as this idea that there is only one essential thing in the universe, and all the different manifestations we see, those are just different iterations or ways that the one is manifesting out its essence. But it is all contained together. Now, in the West, like I mentioned, we specialize in distinctions, how things are different from one another, categorizing labels, etc. In the East, they're looking at this connectivity. And what I wanted to do for you today is I wanted to read you a couple sections. I usually start with the Brahman in the pit, but I couldn't find my book, and so I'm going to actually close with what I ended with. But before I do that, I want to read you something from the Upanishads. And I falsely, I think, stated in my last lecture that the Upanishads were written somewhere around the 7th century AD. That should have been BCE. So these are very old, ancient texts. And these are the ones that actually changed my view about Hinduism in particular, at least what's seen in the Upanishads. So I want to read you just a small section, and then we'll talk about it. Hopefully my old eyes will hold up. This is from the Chandogya Upanishad. And I'm sure I'm going to butcher these Indian names, and I'm sorry, I'll do the best I can. And these names have significance as well. When Savatiku was 12 years old, his father, Udalaka, said to him, Savatiku, you must now go to school and study. None of your family, my child, is ignorant of Brahman. And if you remember, Brahman is this idea of the high God, creator God. Thereupon, Savatiku went to a teacher and studied for 12 years. After committing to memory all the Vedas, he returned from home full of pride in his learning. His father, noticing the young man's conceit, said to him, Savatiku, have you asked for that knowledge by which we hear the unhearable, by which we perceive the unperceivable, and by which we know the unknowable? What is this knowledge, sir? Asked Savatiku. My child, as by knowing one lump of clay, all things of clay may be known. The difference being only a name and arising from speech, and the truth being that all are clay, as by knowing a nugget of gold, all things of gold are known. The difference being only a name and arising from speech, and the truth being that all are gold, exactly so is the knowledge, knowing which we know all. But surely, Father, those venerable teachers of mine are ignorant of this knowledge, for if they had possessed it, they would have taught it to me. Do you therefore, sir, give me that knowledge? Be it so, said Udalaka, and continued thus. As the bees make honey by gathering juices from many flowering plants and trees, and as these juices reduced to one honey do not know from what flower they came, similarly, my son, all creatures, when they are merged in that one existence, whether in dreamless sleep or in death, know nothing of their past or present state, because of the ignorance enveloping them. Know not that they are merged in him, and that from him they came. Whatever these creatures are, whether it's a lion, a tiger, or a boar, or a worm, or a gnat, or a mosquito, that they remain after they come back from dreamless sleep. All these have their self in him alone. He is the truth. He is the subtle essence of all. He is the self. And thou, Savatiku, thou art that. Please, sir, tell me more about this self. Be it so, my son. The rivers in the east flow eastward, the rivers in the west flow westward, and all enter into the sea. From sea to sea they pass, the clouds lifting them to the sky as vapor, and sending them down as rain. And as these rivers, when they are united with the sea, do not know whether they are this or that river, likewise, all those creatures that I have named, when they have come back to Brahman, know not whence they came. All those beings have their self in him alone. He is that truth. He is the subtle essence of all. He is the self, and that Savatiku, thou art that. Please, sir, tell me more about the self. Be it so, my child. Bring a fruit of the Nigdora tree. Here it is, sir. Break it open. It is broken, sir. What do you see? Some seeds extremely small, sir. Break one of them. It is broken, sir. What do you see? Nothing, sir. The subtle essence you do not see, and in that is the whole of the Nidroga tree. Believe me, my son, that which is the subtle essence, and that have all things their existence. That is the truth, that is the self, and that, Savatiku, thou art that. Please, sir, tell me more about the self. Be it so. Put this salt in water, and come to me in the morning. Savatiku did as he was bidden. The next morning his father asked him to bring the salt which he had put in the water, but he could not, for it had dissolved. Then said Udalaka, sip the water, and tell me how it tastes. It's salty, sir. In the same way, continued Udalaka, though you do not see Brahman in the body, he is indeed here. That which is the subtle essence, in that have all things their existence. That is the truth, that is the self, and that, Savatiku, thou art that. And that comes from the Upanishads. And as you can see, this is a far cry from ignorant idol worship, confusing things like stones or rivers or rocks or even idols. It's pointing how all things, whether it's the river, whether it's a rock, whether it's an animal, whether it's a tree, all of them have their essence, all of them have their source in the one. And in reality, they are that one. And that is the core and essential teaching of Hinduism. And that is the goal of enlightenment, is to have that self-realization, or that divine self-realization, that you indeed yourself are God. Any questions, comments on that? I just love that passage. I think it's powerful. It actually reminds me of certain passages from Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, where Solomon is talking about all rivers flow to the sea, but the sea is never full. From whence the rivers came, hence they will return again. And Solomon talks about that which has been is that which is, and that which has been done is that which has already been done, and there is no new thing under the sun. But you just have this constant cycling over and over again. So in the West, we have more of a linear timeline, where we have a creation and a consummation, the beginning and the apocalypse. In the East, it's much more cyclical. And I'm not saying circular per se, but think of more almost like spiraling, these cosmic spirals of things do seem to repeat and come around in cycles, but they're also expanding, changing, moving. Kind of like a Jeremy Bearimy, if you've been watching The Good Place. All right, good. At least a couple of my students thought that was beautiful. I'm glad. And even from a Christian perspective, you could see how much application there would be. You may not go so far as to end each stanza with "thou art that," but in a Christian context, you could easily simply say, "from that you came," or "it is from that sustains you or upholds you or gives you your life or being." Now, for a materialist, it's all just utter nonsense, right? It's all just like, you have a physical tree, you have physical water, you have a physical tiger. There's no essence, non-physical essence that's holding or bringing all these things together. But like I already told you, for the pantheist, this idea that life can come from non-life is nonsensical. But life comes from life. God is life, and all life we see, and even things that, at least in the West, we would consider non-life, all these things have their source and foundation in God. All right, anything else? Okay. Now, the last thing I want to read to you for Hinduism It came from this world religions book I was using for years. And this was kind of their introduction. It's called The Ways of Religion, and I find it a helpful book, if you want to see that. Produced by Roger Eastman. And it's what I like about it is its primary source material taking from each religious tradition. So it's not like a Christian commentary on Buddhism or Islam or Hinduism. It's taking the writings from each tradition themselves and sharing them with you. So instead of beginning with this, I'm going to end with this one. And I don't think I fully understand what this means. I have a few inklings and guesses, but I'm going to read this to you, and I'd love to hear if any of you want to take a shot at what you think is going on. And this particular section is called The Brahman in the Pit. And if you remember, a Brahman, not only a Brahma, or Brahman, is the high name of God, the Brahman caste is the highest caste in India, or when they still had the caste system. A certain Brahman who lived in this world wandered into a deep, dark forest that was filled with ferocious wild animals. The forest was populated with lions, bull elephants, and other animals that roared incessantly. It was so terrifying that even the god of death, Yama, would cringe at entering this malevolent realm. Realizing he was lost, the Brahmin became very alarmed and began to run around in circles, hoping to find his way out. Attempting to elude the frightening creatures which were all around, the panicked man ran deeper into the forest. Still, he could not rid himself of his pursuers. The Brahmin looked up and saw that the forest was surrounded by a net held by a huge woman with outstretched arms. Serpents with 5 heads also encompassed the forest, and were so tall that their heads reached nearly up to the heavens. In a clearing there was a deep pit covered with creeping vines and underbrush. As the Brahmin ran frantically through the forest, pursued by a wild elephant, he stumbled into the open pit and became lodged halfway down the hole in the vines that grew over it. As the Brahmin hung upside down, tangled in the vines, he saw a huge serpent at the bottom of the hole. Looking up, he saw an elephant at the top of the hole. The dark-skinned elephant had 6 faces and 12 feet, and seemed intent on maintaining its vigil at the mouth of the hole. In the vines that held the Brahmin, bees had built hives filled with honey. These hives dripped honey near him, and he reached out to catch the sweet nectar in his mouth as he hung there. The more honey the Brahmin ate, the more he wanted. His thirst could not be quenched. Meanwhile, black and white rats gnawed at the roots of the vines which held him. With elephant above, serpent below, bees buzzing all around, and rats gnawing at his life support, the Brahmin continued to reach out for more honey. Ooh, that's a good one. That net, that's the net of Indira. She was one of the ancient gods. In fact, India is, when India was a polytheistic culture, and if you watch the Hinduism video, I'll show you how it moved from polytheism to pantheism, which, even though there's literally millions of gods in the system, it's still a monotheistic tradition. Hinduism is actually monotheistic. And I know that seems like a wild paradox. You just have to remember the 1,000 different gods or the 1,000,000 different gods. It's just like a jewel. And each facet is a different manifestation or way that God is showing his glory or presence into the world. But once you get past all the names or all the different perspectives, there's really only one being. And like I said, you can call him Yahweh, you can call him Jehovah, you can call him Jesus, you can call him Allah, you can call him Brahman, you can call him Krishna, you can call him Fred, for all I care. It doesn't matter. You can put in your own name in the gap, because you are it. And in Hinduism is kind of like this game of cosmic hide and seek with a god who gets amnesia as he enters into the game. And he goes through all these different iterations until he finds himself once again. And when he finds himself again, he is back in his own own mind. He isn't distracted or confused by all these different little manifestations. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Else are you going to do if you're an eternal being with infinite power and wisdom and time? What better than to create your own adventure in billions and billions of different ways where you live out these countless lives over and over again. Never a dull moment being God. Okay, questions, comments? All right, I'm going to stop this video.